Hey y'all, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Peace Podcast. This is season 2, episode 46. Just give me permission to tend to myself, whatever that looks like. And so when your kids come to you and they're dealing with some sort of mental or emotional angst, and they're having a tantrum or a mental breakdown or something of the sort, you tend to them. You allow them the opportunity to express what they're feeling. Well, hopefully you do. If you're a parent who is emotionally aware and emotionally intelligent, these are the things that you might do. And so you allow them time to process their emotions. You give them the space and the ability to just deal with and feel the things that they're feeling. And then you help them to navigate those emotions so that they can get to the other side. But what happens when we aren't quite as capable of tending to our own emotions and tending to our own selves the way that we might be for our kids? Well, what happens is, much like your children would feel neglected if you didn't tend to them, you tend to feel the same way. And when you think about tending to yourself, the ways that you need tended to are much like the ways that your own children might need tended to, are much like the ways that your relationships in your life need tending to. And so when you neglect those, there's some sort of price that is paid at the end, whether it's a rupture in the relationship or your children feeling like maybe they're not a priority to you. Whatever that case is, there's going to be some sort of rupture. There's going to be some sort of aftermath or effect on that. And the same thing happens with you. When you neglect your emotions, when you neglect what's happening to you, when you neglect the fact that you are a human being who draws breath and takes up space and is dealing with the human experience just like everybody that you are tending to is, you're going to feel ignored, and you're going to feel ignored by yourself. But you're also going to be suppressing those things that need tending to, and they're going to continuously come up over and over and over again because you're not giving yourself or those experiences the attention that you need. The reason that we don't do that oftentimes comes from a space of, I don't have time to do this for myself because I'm so busy doing it for other people, or I'm not worthy of doing this for myself because I've never actually had that coming from my childhood and from other people. So I don't even know what it feels like to have my own experiences tended to have my own emotions tended to. And if you're doing it from the space of, I don't have time, I do understand this because, even when my kids are going through experiences, they might be going through those experiences on the way to school. And so I don't have time to have a 20-minute kumbaya moment with them to get really inward to their emotions and why they're processing things the way that they're processing. But I can give them small things to do in that space so that they're able to kind of tend to their own emotions. So, do some deep breathing, ask yourself why you're feeling that way. Is this really the thing that's bothering you, or there's some other things connected to it? In a quicker way, because I still know that they need to tend to that thing before they go out into the world and experience it, or they're going to bleed over onto other people, their own frustration. Well, for adults, that may look like road rage. It may look like the inability to handle your emotions and regulate your emotions yourself. And so you're fighting other people and you're dealing with conflict constantly because you don't know how to handle your own experience with your emotions. And the same thing happens for our kids, right? And so when we don't have time, quote unquote, to tend to our emotions, we start to create chaos that we're going to have to deal with on the other end anyway. So we create more problems to which we have to tend to and give our time to. And so maybe you're in a hurry, maybe you have other things to do for other people, but all of those experiences will be better suited for you, and you will be better capable of having the capacity to be in them and present in them if you give yourself the time that it takes to just say, I'm feeling this feeling. I don't know why I'm feeling this feeling. Maybe I can connect it to something, and really give yourself the opportunity to be with yourself and to be with the things that are authentic to you, instead of shoving them to the side because you feel like you have somebody else that needs your time and attention. That time and attention that you're giving to somebody else, even if you don't realize it, it is distracted by the emotions that you're shoving down inside of yourself. So you're not really giving them the full capacity of what you could give them because you're not dealing with yourself. And then the other side of it, which I was saying, is sometimes you weren't tended to, and so therefore you don't know how to tend to yourself. Completely understand that, and it happens quite often because we tend to do what we experienced. And so if you experience people telling you things like, stop wearing your emotions on your sleeve, suck it up, don't cry, these type of things, then you were taught that you needed to suppress it and move on. And when you suppress and move on in childhood, it may not be that big of a deal. But when you suppress and move on because you've taken those bad habits into adulthood, those things are way more impactful and way larger than the problems that you had when you were a child. So then the eruption that's happening inside of you either implodes or explodes, and those are the only two places it can go. It either starts to hurt your body physically, internally, or you hurt other people externally because you have to explode on someone, because the emotions have to have somewhere to go. They don't just stay there. You can shove them down for as long as you want to, but eventually they're going to come out in the form of disease or sickness or mistreating other people because you've been suppressing those emotions for so long. So what do we do when we know that there are things that we're feeling and there are things that we need to tend to in ourselves, but someone needs us to cook dinner and someone needs us to take them to their sporting event and someone needs to have a conversation with us and this person wants to unload on us, and so somebody's always needing us to do something else, and we don't often feel like we have enough space or time to tend to ourselves? Well, what you can do is hold space for the emotion. Allow it to be. Say, right now I'm frustrated and I might not have time to go through the full process of dealing with that frustration, but I'm going to name and hold space for the fact that I'm frustrated. I'm not in a good space right now. I'm not feeling joy right now. Something has frustrated me, and I'm going to be okay with naming that emotion and holding space for it. Allowing the emotion isn't weak, which is probably what you've been taught. Allowing the emotion is making it so that you can invite it to the party and then it can leave, instead of inviting it to the party but shoving it down and compounding it with all the other times you felt that frustration until it has to have somewhere to go. And so holding space just says, I understand that I feel this emotion. And I'm feeling it the same way that you would do for your child. Sounds like you're frustrated and you let them feel it. Even if you don't think they have a valid reason to be frustrated, even if you don't think that you have a valid reason to be frustrated, you're still going to hold space for the fact that you're frustrated because you're allowed to be frustrated. Even if you don't think that the thing that happened externally outside of you was enough to cause that big of a reaction, you still have every right to feel an emotion. Now, that's also considering that feelings are not facts. So that feeling, though it's telling you something, though it's real, though it has the ability to hold up space, it isn't necessarily a fact. So that's why we have to try to uncover where that feeling is coming from. And that's why we give space for it. We don't shame ourselves for having the feeling. We don't say, oh my gosh, you're such a baby because you're crying. Oh my gosh, you're so aggressive because you feel frustrated. Oh my gosh, can't you just be? We don't do that. But we say, you know what? I'm having this emotion and I'm going to let myself feel this emotion right now. I'm letting myself feel it so that I am holding space for something internally that I don't want to erupt externally. So I'm going to give myself the space to feel those feelings because they deserve a space to be. When I hold space for them to be real, when I allow the emotions to exist, when I allow myself to feel an emotion, because imagine if someone brought something to you, because we tend to be better at dealing with other people's emotions than we are with our own. But imagine if somebody brought something to you and the first thing you said to them was, wow, you're such a baby. Which hopefully you wouldn't do. But if you did that, what would it make that person do? Shrink, feel guilty, feel self-conscious. You're doing the same thing to yourself when you're saying, wow, you're such a baby, or suck it up, buttercup, and move on, because you think that you're getting past it. But that's what toxic positivity does for us too. It says you don't have the ability to feel these emotions, good vibes only positivity. But in reality, everybody has a plethora and array of emotions. And that type of thinking and mindset is just saying we're going to deny the ones that we feel are bad and negative, and we're only going to accept the ones that we feel are good. But that eliminates the human experience from feelings, because we're allowed to have feelings and not shame ourselves for those feelings. This happens on an everyday basis. Maybe you're annoyed by your best friend today. You're allowed to be annoyed by that person today. It doesn't mean that you are a bad friend. It doesn't mean that the friendship is over. It doesn't even mean that it's going to cause a rupture in the friendship. It just means that today you're annoyed by that person. And that's okay to feel, because then you're going to get over it. You're going to let yourself feel it. You're going to get over it, and then it's going to be gone, as opposed to continuing to let it pile up because you're not allowing yourself to actually feel the human experience of it, and then wondering why you're holding contempt for a person now because you never let yourself fully feel it, and so that you could heal from it. And the last thing you have to do is really give yourself grace, right? So we're holding space. We're allowing those emotions to be felt. We're giving space. We're saying it's okay to feel them. It's okay to have those emotions. We're not going to shame ourselves. And then we're giving grace. So we're saying, it's okay to have it, and I'm going to try to understand where it came from. Is this something that I was taught from a child? Is this something that I just, for whatever reason, took on and maybe influenced by the society around me? Or maybe someone said it and then it stuck with me. Whatever it is, where is it coming from? And let me give myself grace for feeling this thing. Much like you would hold space for joy, much like you would give yourself the ability to feel joy, and much like you would try to understand how that joy, where it's coming from and how it's affecting you, you can do the same thing with frustration and contempt and anger and shame and resentment. All of those can have space to do, you can do the same thing with them. You can have space to do the same thing with them. And so when we give ourselves the ability to feel, then we actually give ourselves the ability to heal. Because when you tend to those things, you're not just letting them be so, but you're giving yourself what you need as a result of it. So you know how sometimes your kids might feel an emotion and you know that they just need a hug? Or maybe they feel an emotion and you just know that they need space. They need some time. Or maybe they feel an emotion and they just need time to process, one, what the emotion even is, and two, why they're feeling it, like what happened to create it. That's the same way that you tend to yourself. So you say, what do I need? Like right now I'm angry. What do I need? Do I need to go take a drive? Do I need to have a conversation with someone so someone hears me? Do I need to pray? Do I need to sit with myself and just sit with the anger and really process where it's coming from or why it's there? What do I need to give myself right now in an effort to tend to the fact that I'm allowing myself to feel feelings and not suppressing them or shaming myself for having them? One of the things that you'll find, and usually it's these top 3 things that you will feel like you need to give yourself in order to tend to what you're experiencing. And the first one is time out. And this is not like time out in the sense of, sit on the stairs for 5 minutes or whatever it is, but it's like I need to extract myself from people in this situation and take time away from it so that I can breathe. A lot of people are leave and breathers. So they have to leave the situation. They got to go take a breath before they can come back to it with a clear head. Those are your people who are going to need to take a drive, walk around the block, go for a run, hit up the gym real quick. They just need to walk away from the heightened emotions that are in that space because they weren't able to fully regulate their emotions and they're feeling a lot of anger. And so they need to just walk away so that that settles a little bit, and then they can come back to it and have a conversation. You can do the same thing with yourself. Right now, I feel like I'm too sad, frustrated, concerned to process this in a healthy way, to have that conversation with myself around what I'm feeling and how I'm going to deal with it. And so because of that, I'm going to need to take a minute, take a beat, come back, and then process this information with myself. So those are the things that you do when you need a timeout. Now, sometimes you need a time in, and that means that you need to just sit in it for a minute. Oftentimes we try to escape our emotions, run from them, break free from them before ever even feeling them. And then we wonder why we have such compound feelings when those small things happen that bring that emotion back up. Sometimes just sitting in the emotion makes you feel like you have the permission to have it. And that's why I actually named this podcast, Give Me Permission to Tend to Myself, because I think sometimes we're waiting for somebody to tell us it's okay. So this is your permission. It's okay to have emotions and to tend to yourself. It's okay to prioritize your emotions and to prioritize tending to yourself, even if it means that some of the things that people have placed on your plate or you've placed on your plate in the way of expectation have to take a back burner for that moment so that you can process your emotions. When you take a time in, you just sit with it. You're like, girl, what is going on with you? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? And most of the time, I'm a time inner. So this is like absolutely me. Most of the time, I avoid my emotion until the point where I start feeling pain in my body. And then when I start feeling pain in my body, I'm like, I haven't sat in my emotions in a while and I need to figure out what's going on. When I tap into them, and oftentimes it doesn't take the pain in my body, but a lot of times when I'm suppressing something, that's when I start to notice it, is when I start to have pain in my body. But when I tap in with myself and I just sit in the emotions, I allow myself to cry. I allow myself to scream if I need to. I allow myself to punch a pillow. I allow myself to just sit in that emotion, breathe through it, feel it, attach it to something, connect it to something, because I know that there is something that's happening in there that's making that emotion so big. And oftentimes for me, it's attached to something that I experienced when I was a kid or a story that I told myself that I've held on to for a really long time. But when I sit in it, it helps me to understand it. It helps me to feel it. It helps me to process it. And then the last one is time to process. Some people need time away from the situation because they don't know what they feel. They just know they feel something big. So they need time to wrap their brains around what is it that happened, what is it that's happening, and what is it that might need to happen. And so they need time, not just a beat from the conversation, but just some time to really say, I need to go through this and process it. Maybe they're not necessarily feeling the feels, but they're understanding the feels. And some people need that in order to fully be able to explain themselves and to fully be able to move forward in those moments. So if you find yourself in a space today where you feel like you're tending to everybody else, but you're not really tending to yourself, and you have an abundance of emotions, and oftentimes you're labeling those as negative emotions, I would encourage you today to tend to yourself the way that you would a child. Tell yourself that it's okay to feel. Give space for yourself to feel those emotions. Give yourself grace and understanding for the way that you're feeling, but then just tend to it. What's your thing? Do you need some space? Do you need to tap into those emotions? Do you need some time to process? Whatever that is, encourage yourself to do those things for yourself so that you're not neglected in the same way that a child would feel neglected if they didn't get those things. And what will happen in the long term is that you'll stop stuffing your emotions. You'll give yourself the capacity to feel emotions, and then you'll be on a journey to healing, but also in a place where you can feel, deal, and then keep it moving. Right now, you're not there because you're suppressing. The dealing is missing. And so if you're in that space today and you need some encouragement or some help, I would encourage you to go to my social media pages, tap into those DMs. I would gladly assist you in that process. And also, if you're somebody that this resonated with, and you know some people that it would also resonate with, please share this message. Remember, knowledge gained and kept to yourself is selfish, but share with other people will help them to break free from the bondage that they're experiencing. And we all need a catalyst for breaking free from that bondage, because if we sit in it on our own, then we tend to ruminate on the things we know instead of getting that knowledge. It's going to help us wake up to something that will help us break free. I appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you again next time.